one of your frustrations, Mr. Akua, was that your students didn't have materials that they related to, and you collaborated with another African-American male teacher to write a reading revolution. Can you talk to us about that process, how that happened?
Absolutely. My last 3 years in the classroom, I was a Title I language arts teacher, reading specialist. And so all the students that were sent to me had not passed the state test. And so I immediately began to kind of envision where I wanted to take my students. And where I wanted to take my students was far beyond a minimal competency test. I wanted them to not only increase their reading comprehension, I wanted to increase their cultural awareness. Because you can have a child to pass the state test and still be a burden to their own community because they're not culturally competent. And so I called upon one of my friends and colleagues, Mr. Tavar Stevens, who himself is a distinguished master teacher, also in Georgia, former Teacher of the Year. And I asked him to craft with me some reading selections that would begin to ground our young people in not only in cultural relevant pedagogy, but the types of people that they need to be reading about who, again, were able to overcome insurmountable odds to become successful. Well, I think as I look back through my teaching experiences, the things that worked is that establishing a connection with your students. And in establishing a connection with your students, you have to come to where they are. And it's reflected in the language that they use. One of the first things that children will ask you is, "Are you feeling me?" Or they will tell you, "No, you're not feeling me." And so that again, that relational aspect, getting to know who they are and having a love for being there. To me, it is personally unacceptable to live in a country where you have such a large percentage of the population of African American students in the public school system, and yet such a small number of African American male teachers. To me, that's unacceptable. And I don't subscribe to the thought that they're just not out there. They are out there. They need to be identified and they need to be supported. As a matter of fact, one of my hopes for the new administration, as President-elect Obama begins to formulate his education plan, is that there would be a policy to begin to systematically train, identify, train, and recruit a new breed of African American and Hispanic male educators. Of course, there needs to be more educators across the board. But there's no question about the relationships that are forged when you have a strong African-American male presence in the classroom.
Absolutely. It's a well-taken point. Nearly 40% of public school students in this country are African-American, Hispanic, Latino, yet only 6 to 8% of the nation's teachers are African-American. Even in central cities, inside of urban school districts, urban centers, only about 71% of teachers 71% of teachers are white. So there's a tremendous demographic mismatch between the public school teachers and the students that are being served.
But let me add to that, those new teachers who are identified and recruited and trained, they must be trained in culturally relevant pedagogy. They must be culturally competent. Because just being African American or just being Latino is not a guarantee. There are plenty of African American teachers who are passing on the same pathologies, who are passing on the miseducation because they were never truly educated themselves. And so it's very important that we receive the proper training and education about how to educate others.
What happens at home is important.
What happens at home is absolutely significant. And we know, and studies show that if parents would spend just 15 minutes a night reading with their child, and I'm not just talking about the primary grades, we're talking about all the way through. Spending some quiet time at home reading, there's no question about the results that has in terms of long-range gains. However, if that parental support is not there, that doesn't mean that we just say, well, you're not receiving parental support, so we can't help you. No, we believe that the first area of achievement first begins with having a vision right here, in the mind of the teacher. That I don't see an incompetent student in front of me. I don't see a student who's not being supported at home. I see a scholar. And I say, send me a student, I'm going to send you a scholar. But I have to see them that way first. Beyond the sagging pants, beyond the cornrows, beyond any of the behavioral issues that may be presenting themselves on the surface. And I say that not only as a teacher, but I say that as one who used to be a chronic underachiever myself with a 1.9 GPA.